Book 16. A ship fired, a tide turned. That was the way the fighting went for one sea-going ship. Meanwhile, Patroclus approached Achilles, his commander, streaming warm tears, like a shaded mountain spring that makes a rock ledge run with dusky water. Achilles watched him come and felt a pang for him. Then the great prince and runner said, "Patroclus, why all the weeping? Like a small girl-child who runs beside her mother and cries to be taken up, and catches at her gown and will not let her go, looking up in tears until she has her wish. That's how you seem, Patroclus, winking out your glimmering tears. Have you something to tell the Myrmidons or me? Some message you alone have heard from Phthia? But they say that Actor's son, Menoetius, is still living, and Peleus, the son of Aeacus, lives on amid his Myrmidons. If one of these were dead, we should be grieved. Or is this weeping over the Argives, seeing how they perish at the long ships by their own bloody fault? Speak out now, don't conceal it, let us share it." And groaning, Patroclus, you replied, "Achilles, prince and greatest of Achaeans, be forbearing, they are badly hurt. All who were the best fighters are now lying among the ships with spear or arrow wounds. Diomedes, Tydeus' rugged son, was shot. Odysseus and Agamemnon, the great spearmen, have spear wounds. Eurypylus took an arrow shot deep in his thigh. Surgeons with medicines are attending them to ease their wounds. But you are a hard case, Achilles. God forbid this rage you nurse should master me, you and your fearsome pride. What good will come of it to anyone later, unless you keep disaster from the Argives? Have you no pity? Peleus, master of horse, was not your father. Thetis was not your mother. Cold grey sea and sea cliffs bore you, making a mind so harsh. If in your heart you fear some oracle, some word of Zeus told by your gentle mother, then send me out at least, and send me quickly. Give me a company of Myrmidons, and I may be a beacon to Danaans. Lend me your gear to strap over my shoulders. Trojans then may take me for yourself and break off battle, giving our worn-out men a chance to breathe. Respites are brief in war. We fresh troops with one battle cry might easily push their tired men back on the town, away from ships and huts." So he petitioned, witless as a child that what he begged for was his own death, hard death and doom. Achilles, out of his deep anger, made reply, "Hard words, dear prince. There is no oracle I know of that I must respect, no word from Zeus reported by my gentle mother. Only this bitterness eats at my heart, when one man would deprive and shame his equal, taking back his prize by abuse of power. The girl whom the Achaeans chose for me I won by my own spear. A town with walls I stormed and sacked for her. Then Agamemnon stole her back out of my hands, as though I were some vagabond held cheap. All that we can let pass as being over and done with. I could not rage forever, and yet, by heaven, I swore I would not rest from anger till the cries and clangor of battle reached my very ships. But you can strap my famous gear on your own shoulders, and then take command of Myrmidons on edge and ripe for combat. Now that like a dark storm cloud the Trojans have poured round the first ships, and Argive troops have almost no room for manoeuvre left, with nothing to their rear but sea. The whole townful of Trojans joins in, sure of winning, because they cannot see my helmet's brow a flash in range of them. They'd fill the gullies with dead men soon, in flight up through the plain, if Agamemnon were on good terms with me. As things are, they've outflanked the camp. A mercy for them that in the hands of Diomedes no great spear goes berserk, warding death from the Danaans. Not yet have I heard the voice of Agamemnon either shouting out of his hateful skull. The shout of Hector the killer calling Trojans makes a roar like breaking surf, and with long answering cries they hold the plain where they drove the Achaeans. Even so defend the ships, Patroclus. Attack the enemy in force, or they will set the ships ablaze with whirling fire and rob Achaeans of their dear return. Now carry out the purpose I confide, so that you'll win great honor for me and glory among Danaans. Then they'll send me back, my lovely girl, with bright new gifts as well. Once you expel the enemy from the ships, rejoin me here. If Hera's lord, the lord of thunder, grants you the day's honor, covet no further combat far from me with Trojan soldiers. That way you deny me recompense of honor. You must not, for joy of battle, joy of killing Trojans, carry the fight to Iliad. Some power out of Olympus, one of the immortal gods, might intervene for them. The Lord Apollo loves the Trojans. Turn back, then, as soon as you restore the safety of the ships, and let the rest contend out on the plain. Oh, Father Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, if not one Trojan of them all should get away from death, and not one Argive save ourselves were spared, we two alone could pull down Troy's old coronet of towers. These were the speeches they exchanged. Now Ajax could no longer hold. He was dislodged by spear throws, beaten by the mind of Zeus and Trojan shots. His shining helm rang out around his temples dangerously with hits as his helm plates were struck and struck again. He felt his shoulder galled on the left side, hugging the glittering shield, and yet they could not shake it, putting all their weight in throws. In painful gasps his breath came. Sweat ran down in rivers off his body everywhere. No rest for him, but trouble upon trouble. Now tell me, Muses, dwellers on Olympus, how fire first fell on the Achaean ships. Hector moved in to slash with his long blade at Ajax's ashwood shaft, and near the spearhead lopped it off. Then Telamonian Ajax wielded a pointless shaft, while far away the flying bronze head rang upon the ground, and Ajax shivered, knowing in his heart the work of gods. How Zeus, the Lord of Thunder, cut off his warcraft in that fight, and willed victory to the Trojans. He gave way before their missiles as they rushed in throwing untiring fire into the ship. It caught at once, agush with flame, and fire lapped about the stern. Achilles smote his thighs and said to Patroclus, "Now go, into action, prince and horseman. I see roaring fire burst at the ships. Action, or they'll destroy them, leaving no means of getting home. Be quick, strap on my gear, while I alert the troops." Patroclus now put on the flashing bronze. Greaves were the first thing, beautifully fitted to calf and shin with silver ankle chains. And next he buckled round his ribs the cuirass, blazoned with stars of swift Achaeans. Then slung the silver-studded blade of bronze about his shoulders, and the vast solid shield. Then on his noble head he placed the helm, its plume of terror nodding high above, and took 2 burly spears with his own hand-grip. He did not take the great spear of Achilles, weighty, long, and tough. No other Achaean had the strength to wield it, only Achilles. It was a Pelian ash, cut on the crest of Pelion, given to Achilles' father by Chiron to deal death to soldiery. He then ordered his war team put in harness by Myrmidon, whom he most admired after Prince Achilles, breaker of men, for waiting steadfast at his call in battle. Myrmidon yoked the fast horses for him, Xanthus and Balius, races of wind. The storm-gust Podagi, who once had grazed green meadowland by the ocean stream, conceived and bore them to the west wind Zephyrus. In the side traces, Pedasus, a thoroughbred, was added to the team. Achilles took him when he destroyed the city of Eetion. Mortal, he ran beside immortal horses. Achilles put the Myrmidons in arms, the whole detachment near the huts. Like wolves, carnivorous and fierce and tireless, who rend a great stag on a mountainside and feed on him, their jaws reddened with blood, loping in a pack to drink spring water, lapping the dark rim up with slender tongues, their chops adrip with fresh blood, their hearts unshaken ever, and their bellies glutted. Such were the Myrmidons and their officers, running to form up round Achilles' brave companion in arms. And like the god of war, among them was Achilles. He stood tall, and sped the chariots and shield men onward. 50 ships there were that Lord Achilles, favoured of heaven, led to Troy. In each were 50 soldiers, shipmates at the rowlocks. 5 he entrusted with command, and made lieutenants, while he ruled them all as king. One company was headed by Menestheus in his glittering breastplate, son of Spercheius, a river fed by heaven. Peleus' daughter, beautiful Polydore, had conceived him, lying with Spercheius, untiring stream, a woman with a god. But the world thought she bore her child to Perieres' son, Borus, who married her in the eyes of men and offered countless bridal gifts. A second company was commanded by Eudorus, whose mother was unmarried, Polymele, Phylus's daughter, a beautiful dancer with whom the strong god Hermes fell in love, seeing her among singing girls who moved in measure for the lady of belling hounds, Artemis of the golden shaft. And Hermes, pure deliverer, ascending soon to an upper room, lay secretly with her who was to bear his brilliant son Eudorus, a first-rate man at running and in war. When Eileithyia, sending pangs of labour, brought him forth to see the sun-rays, then strong-minded Achilles, Actor's son, led the girl home with countless bridal gifts. But Philus in his age brought up the boy with all kind care, as though he were a son. Company 3 was led by Epicandrus Mimelides, the best man with a spear, of all Myrmidons after Patroclus. Company 4, the old man, master of horse, Phoenix, commanded. Alcimedon, son of Laerces, commanded Company 5. When all were mustered under their officers, Achilles had strict orders to impart. Myrmidons, let not one man forget how menacing you were against the Trojans during my anger and seclusion, how each one reproached me, saying, Iron-hearted son of Peleus, now we see your mother brought you up on rage, merciless man, the way you keep your men confined to camp against their will. We might as well sail home in our sea-going ships, now this infernal anger has come over you. That way, you often talked, in groups around our fires. Now the great task of battle is at hand that you were longing for. Now every soldier keep a fighting heart and face the Trojans. He stirred and braced their spirit. Every rank fell in more sharply when it heard its king. As when a builder, fitting stone on stone, lays well a high house wall to buffet back the might of winds, just so they fitted helms and studded shields together. Shield rim on shield rim, helmet on helmet, men all pressed on one another. Horsehair plumes brushed on the bright crests as the soldiers nodded, densely packed as they were. Before them all 2 captains stood in gear of war, Patroclus and Myrmidon, of one mind, resolved to open combat in the lead. Achilles went to his hut. He lifted up the lid of a sea chest, all intricately wrought, that Thetis of the silver feet had stowed aboard his ship for him to take to Iliad, filled to the brim with shirts, wind-breaking cloaks, and fleecy rugs. His hammered cup was there, from which no other man drank the bright wine, and he made offering to no god but Zeus. Lifting it from the chest, he purified it first with brimstone, washed it with clear water, and washed his hands, then dipped it full of wine. Now standing in the forecourt, looking up toward heaven, he prayed and poured his offering out. And Zeus, who plays in thunder, heard his prayer. Zeus of Dodona, god of Pelasgians, O god whose home lies far, ruler of wintry harsh Dodona, your interpreters, the Selli, live with feet like roots, unwashed, and sleep on the hard ground. My lord, you heard me praying before this, and honored me by punishing the Achaean army. Now, again, accomplish what I most desire. I shall stay on the beach behind the ships, but send my dear friend with a mass of soldiers, Myrmidons, into combat. Let your glory, Zeus, who view the wide world, go beside him. Sir, exalt his heart, so Hector too may see whether my friend can only fight when I am in the field, or whether single-handed he can scatter them before his fury. When he has thrown back their shouting onslaught from the ships, then let him return unhurt to the shipways and to me, his gear intact, with all his fighting men. That was his prayer. And Zeus, who views the wide world, heard him. Part he granted, part denied. He let Patroclus push the heavy fighting back from the ships, but would not let him come unscathed from battle. Now after Achilles had made his prayer and offering to Zeus, he entered his hut again, restored the cup to his sea chest, and took his place outside, desiring still to watch the savage combat of Trojans and Achaeans. Brave Patroclus's men moved forward with high hearts until they charged the Trojans. Myrmidons in waves, like hornets that small boys, as boys will do, the idiots, poke up with constant teasing in their daub chambers on the road to give everyone trouble. If some traveller who passes unaware should then excite them, all the swarms come raging out to defend their young. So hot, so angrily the Myrmidons came pouring from the ships in a quenchless din of shouting. And Patroclus cried above them all, O Myrmidons, brothers in arms of Peleus' son Achilles, fight like men, dear friends. Remember courage. Let us win honour for the son of Peleus. He is the greatest captain on the beach. His officers and soldiers are the bravest. Let King Agamemnon learn his folly in holding cheap the best of the Achaeans. Shouting so, he stirred their hearts. They fell as one man on the Trojans, and the ships around them echoed the onrush and the cries. On seeing Menoetius' powerful son, and with him Myrmidon, aflash with brazen gear, the Trojan ranks broke, and they caught their breath, imagining that Achilles, the swift fighter, had put aside his wrath for friendship's sake. Now each man kept an eye out for retreat from sudden death. Patroclus drove ahead, against their centre with his shining spear, into the huddling mass, around the stern of Protesilaus' burning ship. He hit Pericles, who had led the Paeonies from Myrmidon, from Axius' wide river, hit him in the right shoulder. Backward in dust he tumbled, groaning, and his men-at-arms, the Paeonies, fell back around him. Dealing death to a chief and champion, Patroclus drove them in confusion from the ship and doused the tigerish fire. The hull, half burnt, lay smoking on the shipway. Now the Trojans, with a great outcry, streamed away. Danaans poured along the curved ships, and the din of war kept on. As when the lightning master Zeus removes a dense cloud from the peak of some great mountain, and the lookout points and spurs and clearings are distinctly seen as though pure space had broken through from heaven. So, when the dangerous fire had been repelled, Danaans took breath for a space. The battle had not ended, though. Not yet were Trojans put to rout by the Achaean charge, or out of range of the black ships. They withdrew, but by regrouping tried to make a stand. In broken ranks the captains sought and killed each other, Meneuetius' son making the first kill. As Areilycus wheeled round to fight, he caught him with his spearhead in the hip, and drove the bronze through, shattering the bone. He sprawled face downward on the ground. Now veteran Menelaus, thrusting past the shield of Thoas to the bare chest, brought him down. Rushed by Amphiclus, the alert Meges got his thrust in first, hitting his thigh where a man's muscles bunch. Around the spearhead tendons were split, and darkness veiled his eyes. Nestor's sons were in action. Antilochus with his good spear brought down Atymnius, laying open his flank. He fell head first. Now Maris moved in, raging for his brother, lunging over the dead man with his spear, but Thrasymedes had already lunged and did not miss, but smashed his shoulder squarely, tearing his upper arm out of the socket, severing muscles, breaking through the bone. He thudded down, and darkness veiled his eyes. So these two, overcome by the two brothers, dropped to the underworld of Erebus. They were Sarpedon's true brothers-in-arms, and sons of Amisodarus, who had reared the fierce Chimera, nightmare to many men. Ajax, Oileus' son, drove at Cleobulus, and took him alive, encumbered in the press, but killed him on the spot with a sword-stroke across his nape, the whole blade running hot with blood, as welling death and his harsh destiny possessed him. Now Peneleus and Lycon clashed, as both had cast and missed and lunged and missed with spears. They fought again with swords. The stroke of Lycon came down on the other's helmet ridge, but his blade broke at the hilt. Peneleus thrust at his neck below the ear and drove the blade clear in and through. His head toppled, held only by skin, and his knees gave way. Meriones on the run overtook Acamas, mounting behind his horses, and hit his shoulder, knocking him from the car. Mist swathed his eyes. Idomeneus thrust hard at Eremus' mouth with his hard bronze. The spearhead passed on through beneath his brain and split the wide brain pan. His teeth were dashed out. Blood filled both his eyes, and from his mouth and nostrils, as he gaped, he spurted blood. Death's cloud enveloped him. There each Danaan captain killed his man. As ravenous wolves come down on lambs and kids astray from some flock that in hilly countries splits in two by a shepherd's negligence, and quickly wolves bear off the defenceless things, so when the Danaans fell on Trojans, shrieking flight was all they thought of, not of combat. Ajax the Tall kept after bronze-helmed Hector, casting his lance, but Hector, skilled in war, would fit his shoulders under the bull's-hide shield and watch for whizzing arrows, thudding spears. Aye, though he knew the tide of battle turned, he kept his discipline and saved his friends. As when Lord Zeus would hang the sky with storm, a cloud may enter heaven from Olympus out of crystalline space, so terror and cries increased about the shipways. In disorder, men withdrew. Then Hector's chariot team, cantering, bore him off with all his gear, leaving the Trojans whom the moat confined. And many chariot horses in that ditch, breaking their poles off at the tip, abandoned war cars and masters. Hard on their heels, Patroclus kept on calling Danaan fighters onward with slaughter in his heart. The Trojans, yelling and clattering, filled all the ways, their companies cut in pieces. High in air a blast of wind swept on, under the clouds as chariot horses raced back toward the town, away from the encampment, and Patroclus rode shouting where he saw the enemy mass in uproar. Men fell from their chariots under the wheels, and cars jounced over them. And running horses leapt over the ditch, immortal horses whom the gods gave Peleus, galloping as their mettle called them onward after Hector, target of Patroclus. But Hector's battle team bore him away. As under a great storm black earth is drenched on an autumn day, when Zeus pours down the rain in scudding gusts to punish men, annoyed because they will enforce their crooked judgments, and banish justice from the marketplace, thoughtless of the gods' vengeance. All their streams run high and full, and torrents cut their way down dry declivities into the swollen sea with a hoarse clamour, headlong out of hills, while cultivated fields erode away. Such was the gasping flight of the Trojan horses. When he had cut their first wave off, Patroclus forced it back again upon the ships, as the men fought toward the city. In between the ships and river and the parapet, he swept among them, killing, taking toll for many dead Achaeans. First, thrusting past Pronous's shield, he hit him on the bare chest and made him crumple. Down he tumbled with a crash. Then he rushed Thestor, Enop's son, who sat all doubled up in a polished war-car, shocked out of his wits, the reins flown from his hands, and the Achaean got home his thrust on the right jawbone, driving through his teeth. He hooked him by the spearhead over the chariot rail, as a fisherman on a point of rock will hook a splendid fish with line and dazzling bronze out of the ocean. So from his chariot on the shining spear he hooked him, gaping and face downward through him, life going out of him as he fell. Patroclus now met Aurelius's rush and hit him square mid-skull with a big stone. Within his helm the skull was cleft asunder, and down he went head-first to earth. Heart-breaking death engulfed him. Next Eremus, Amphoterus, Epaltes, Telepolemus Damastorides, Echius, Pyrrhus, Iphias, Euopus, Polymelus, all in quick succession he brought down to the once peaceful pasture-land. Sarpedon, seeing his brothers-in-arms in their unbelted battle-jackets downed at Patroclus's hands, called in bitterness to the Lycians. "Shame, O Lycians, where are you running? Now you show your speed. I'll take on this one, and learn what man he is that has the power to do such havoc as he has done among us, cutting down so many and such good men." He vaulted from his car with all his gear, and on his side Patroclus, when he saw him, leapt from his car. Like two great birds of prey with hooked talons and angled beaks, who screech and clash on a high ridge of rock, these two rushed one another with hoarse cries. But Zeus, the son of crooked-minded Cronos, watched and pitied them. He said to Hera, "I sorrow for me that in the scheme of things the dearest of men to me must lie in dust before the son of Menoetius, Patroclus. My heart goes two ways as I ponder this. Shall I catch up Sarpedon out of the mortal fight with all its woe, and put him down alive in Lycia, in that rich land? Or shall I make him fall beneath Patroclus's hard-thrown spear?" Then Hera of the wide eyes answered him, "O fearsome power, my lord Zeus, what a curious thing to say! A man who is born to die, long destined for it, would you set free from that unspeakable end? Do so, but not all of us will praise you. And this too I may tell you. Ponder this. Should you dispatch Sarpedon home alive, anticipate some other god's desire to pluck a man he loves out of the battle. Many who fight around the town of Priam sprang from immortals. You'll infuriate these. No, dear to you though he is, and though you mourn him, let him fall, even so, in the rough battle, killed by the son of Menoetius, Patroclus. Afterward, when his soul is gone, his lifetime ended, death and sweetest sleep can bear him homeward to the broad domain of Lycia. There friends and kin may give him funeral, with tomb and stone, the trophies of the dead." To this the father of gods and men agreed, but showered bloody drops upon the earth, for the dear son Patroclus would destroy in fertile Ilion, far from home. When the two men had come in range, Patroclus turned like lightning against Thrasidemus, a tough man ever at Sarpedon's side, and gave him a death wound in the underbelly. Sarpedon's counterthrust went wide, but hit the trace-horse Pedasus in the right shoulder. Screaming harshly, panting his life away, he crashed and whinnied in the dust. The spirit left him with a wing-beat. The team shied and strained apart with a great creak of the yoke, as reins were tangled over the dead weight of their outrider fallen. Myrmidon, the good soldier, found a way to end it. Pulling his long blade from his hip, he jumped in fast and cut the trace-horse free. The team then ranged themselves beside the pole, drawing the reins taut, and once more, devoured by fighting madness, the two men clashed. Sarpedon missed again. He drove his spearhead over the left shoulder of Patroclus, not even grazing him. Patroclus then made his last throw, and the weapon left his hand with flawless aim. He hit his enemy just where the muscles of the diaphragm encased his throbbing heart. Sarpedon fell the way an oak or poplar or tall pine goes down when shipwrights in the wooded hills with whetted axes chop it down for timber. So full length, before his war-car lay Sarpedon raging, clutching the bloody dust. Imagine a great-hearted sultry bull a lion kills amid a shambling herd. With choking groans he dies under the claws. So, mortally wounded by Patroclus, the chief of Lycian shieldsmen lay in agony, and called his friend by name. "Glaucus, old man, old war dog, now's the time to be a spearman. Put your heart in combat, let grim war be all your longing. Quickly, if you can, arouse the Lycian captains, round them up, to fight over Sarpedon. You too, fight to keep my body, else in later days this day will be your shame. You'll hang your head all your life long, if these Achaeans take my armour here, where I have gone down fighting before the ships. Hold hard, cheer on the troops." The end of life came on him as he spoke, closing his eyes and nostrils. And Patroclus, with one foot on his chest, drew from his belly spearhead and spear. The diaphragm came out. So he extracted life and blade together. Myrmidons clung to the panting Lycian horses, rearing to turn the car left by their lords. But bitter anguish at Sarpedon's voice had come to Glaucus, and his heart despaired because he had not helped his friend. He gripped his own right arm and squeezed it, being numb where Teucrus with a bowshot from the rampart had hit him while he fought for his own men, and he spoke out in prayer to Lord Apollo. "Hear me, O Lord, somewhere in Lycian farmland or else in Troy, for you have power to listen the whole world round to a man hard-pressed as I. I have my sore wound, all my length of arm a-throb with lancing pain. The flow of blood cannot be stanched. My shoulders heavy with it. I cannot hold my spear right or do battle, cannot attack them. Here's a great man destroyed, Sarpedon, son of Zeus. Zeus let his own son die undefended. O my lord, heal this wound, lull me my pains, put vigour in me. Let me shout to my Lycians, move them into combat. Let me give battle for the dead man here." This way he prayed, and Phoebus Apollo heard him, cutting his pain and making the dark blood dry on his deep wound, then filled his heart with valour. Glaucus felt the change, and knew with joy how swiftly the great god had heard his prayer. First he appealed to the Lycian captains, going right and left, to defend Sarpedon's body. Then on the run he followed other Trojans, Polydamas, Panthoas' son, Agenor, and caught up with Aeneas and with Hector, shoulder to shoulder, urgently appealing. "Hector, you've put your allies out of mind. Those men who give their lives here for your sake, so distant from their friends and lands, you will not come to their aid. Sarpedon lies there dead, commander of the Lycians, who kept his country safe by his firm hand in justice. Ares in bronze has brought him down. The spear belonged to Patroclus. Come, stand with me, friends, and count it shame if they strip off his gear or bring dishonour on his body. These fresh Myrmidons, enraged for the Danaans, cut down at the shipways by our spears." At this, grief and remorse possessed the Trojans, grief not to be borne, because Sarpedon had been a bastion of the town of Troy, foreigner though he was. A host came with him, but he had fought most gallantly of all. They made straight for the Danaans, and Hector led them, hot with anger for Sarpedon. Patroclus, in his savagery, cheered on the Achaeans, first the two named Ajax, both already aflame for war. "Ajax and Ajax, let it be sweet to you to stand and fight. You always do. Be lion-hearted now. The man who crossed the rampart of Achaeans first of all lies dead, Sarpedon. May we take him, dishonour him, and strip his arms, and hurl any friend who would defend him into the dust with our hard bronze." At this they burned to throw the Trojans back, and both sides reinforced their battle lines, Trojans and Lycians, Myrmidons and Achaeans, moving up to fight around the dead with fierce cries and clanging of men's armour. Zeus unfurled a deathly gloom of night over the combat, making battle toil about his dear son's body a fearsome thing. At first the Trojans drove back the Achaeans, fiery-eyed as they were. One Myrmidon, and not the least, was killed, noble Epigeus, a son of Achilles. In Budion, a flourishing town, he ruled before the war, but slew a kinsman, So he came as suppliant to Peleus and to Thetis, who enlisted him along with Lord Achilles, breaker of men, to make war in the wild horse country of Iliad against the Trojans. Even as he touched the dead man, Hector hit him square upon the crest with a great stone. His skull split in the helmet, and he fell prone upon the corpse. Death's cloud poured round him, heart-corroding. Grief and pain for this friend dying came to Lord Patroclus, who pounced through spear-play like a diving hawk that puts jackdaws and starlings wildly to flight. Straight through Lycians, through Trojans too, you drove, Patroclus, master of horse, in fury for your friend. Sthenelaus, the son of Euthymenes, was the victim. Patroclus with a great stone broke his nape cord. Backward the line bent. Hector too gave way, as far as a hunting spear may hurtle, thrown by a man in practice or in competition, or matched with deadly foes in war. So far the Trojans ebbed, as the Achaeans drove them. Glaucus, commander of Lycians, turned first, to bring down valorous Patroclus, the son of Chalcon, one who had his home in Hellas, fortunate and rich among the Myrmidons. Whirling as this man caught him, Glaucus hit him full in the breastbone with his spear, and down he thudded on his face. The Achaeans grieved to see their champion fallen, but great joy came to the Trojans, and they thronged about him. Not that Achaeans now forgot their courage, no, for their momentum carried them on. Meriones brought down a Trojan soldier, Laogonus, Oneta's rugged son, a priest of Zeus on Ida, honoured there as gods are. Gashed now under jaw and ear, his life ran out, and hateful darkness took him. Then at Meriones, Aeneas cast his bronze-shod spear, thinking to reach his body under the shield as he came on. But he looked out for it and swerved, slipping the spear-throw, bowing forward, so the long shaft stuck in earth behind him, and the butt quivered. The god Ares deprived it of its power. Aeneas raged and sneered. "Meriones, fast dodger that you are, if I had hit you, my spearhead would have stopped your dance for good." Meriones, good spearman, answered him, "For all your power, Aeneas, you could hardly quench the fighting spirit of every man defending himself against you. You are made of mortal stuff like me. I too can say, if I could hit you square, then tough and sure as you may be, you would concede the game and give your soul to the Lord of Nightmare, Death." Patroclus said to him sharply, "Meriones, you have your skill. Why make a speech about it? No, old friend, rough words will make no Trojans back away from the body. Many a one will be embraced by earth before they do. War is the use of arms. Words are for counsel. More talk's pointless now. We need more fighting." He pushed on, and godlike Meriones fought at his side. Think of the sound of strokes woodcutters make in mountain glens, the echoes ringing for listeners far away. Just so the battering din of these in combat rose from earth where the living go their ways, the clang of bronze, hard blows on leather, on bull's hide, as longsword blades and spearheads met their marks. And an observer could not by now have seen the Prince Sarpedon, since from head to foot he lay enwrapped in weapons, dust and blood. Men kept crowding around the corpse, like flies that swarm and drone in farmyards round the milk pails on spring days, when the pails are splashed with milk, just so they thronged around the corpse. And Zeus would never turn his shining eyes away from this melee, but watched them all and pondered long over the slaughter of Patroclus, whether in that place, on Sarpedon's body, Hector should kill the man and take his gear, or whether he, Zeus, should augment the moil of battle for still other men. He weighed it and thought this best, that for a while Achilles' shining brother-in-arms should drive his foes and Hector in the bronze helm toward the city, taking the lives of many. First of all he weakened Hector, made him mount his car and turn away, retreating, crying out to others to retreat, for he perceived the dipping scales of Zeus. At this the Lycians themselves could not stand fast, but all turned back once they had seen their king struck to the heart, lying amid swales of dead. For many fell to earth beside him when Lord Zeus had drawn the savage battle line. So now Achaeans lifted from Sarpedon's shoulders gleaming arms of bronze, and these Patroclus gave to his soldiers to be carried back to the decked ships. At this point, to Apollo, Zeus, who gathers clouds, said, "Wipe away the blood-mantling Sarpedon. Take him up, out of the play of spears, a long way off, and wash him in the river. Anoint him with ambrosia, put ambrosial clothing on him. Then have him conveyed by those escorting spirits quick as wind, sweet sleep and death, who are twin brothers. These will set him down in the rich broad land of Lycia, and there his kin and friends may bury him, with tomb and stone, the trophies of the dead. Attentive to his father, Lord Apollo went down the foothills of Ida to the field, and lifted Prince Sarpedon clear of it. He bore him far and bathed him in the river, scented him with ambrosia, put ambrosial clothing on him, then had him conveyed by those escorting spirits quick as wind, sweet sleep and death, who are twin brothers. These returned him to the rich broad land of Lycia. Patroclus, calling to his team, commanding Myrmidon, rode on after the Trojans and Lycians. All this to his undoing, the blunderer. By keeping Achilles' mandate, he might have fled black fate and cruel death. But overpowering is the mind of Zeus, forever matched with man's. He turns in fright the powerful man, and robs him of his victory easily, though he drove him on himself. So now he stirred Patroclus's heart to fury. Whom first, whom later, did you kill in battle, Patroclus, when the gods were calling deathward? First it was Adrestus, Autonomous, and Achilles. Then Perimus Megades, Aristor, Melanippus. Afterward Ilassus, Mulius, Pilates. These he cut down, while the rest looked to their flight. Troy of the towering gates was on the verge of being taken by the Achaeans, under Patroclus's drive. He raced with blooded spear ahead and around it. On the massive tower, Phoebus Apollo stood as Troy's defender, deadly toward him. Now 3 times Patroclus assaulted the high wall at the tower joint, and 3 times Lord Apollo threw him back with counterblows of his immortal hands against the resplendent shield. The Achaean then a 4th time flung himself against the wall, more than human in fury. But Apollo thundered, "Back, Patroclus, lordly man! Destiny will not let this fortress town of Trojans fall to you, not to Achilles either, greater far though he is in war." Patroclus now retired, a long way off, and out of range of Lord Apollo's anger. Hector had held his team at the Scaean gates, being of 2 minds. Should he re-engage, or call his troops to shelter behind the wall? While he debated this, Phoebus Apollo stood at his shoulder in a strong man's guise. Asius, his maternal uncle, brother of Hecabe and son of Dymas, dweller in Phrygia on Sangarius River. Taking his semblance now, Apollo said, "Why break off battle, Hector? You need not. Were I superior to you in the measure that I am now inferior, you'd suffer from turning back so wretchedly from battle. Action! Lash your team against Patroclus, and see if you can take him. May Apollo grant you the glory." And at this, once more, he joined the melee, entering it as a god. Hector in splendor called Cebriones to whip the horses toward the fight. Apollo, disappearing into the ranks, aroused confusion in the Argives, but on Hector and on the Trojans he conferred his glory. Letting the rest go, Hector drove his team straight at Patroclus, and Patroclus faced him, vaulting from his war car with his spear gripped in his left hand. In his right he held enfolded a sparkling jagged stone. Not for long in awe of the other man, he aimed and braced himself, and threw the stone and scored a direct hit on Hector's driver, Cebriones, a bastard son of Priam, smashing his forehead with the jagged stone. Both brows were hit at once, the frontal bone gave way, and both his eyes burst from their sockets, dropping into the dust before his feet. As like a diver from the handsome car he plummeted, and life ebbed from his bones. You jeered at him then, master of horse, Patroclus. God, what a nimble fellow, somersaulting! If he were out at sea in the fishing grounds, this man could feed a crew, diving for oysters, going overboard even in rough water, the way he took that earth dive from his car. The Trojans have their acrobats, I see. With this he went for the dead man with a spring like a lion, one that has taken a chest wound while ravaging a cattle pen, his valour his undoing. So you sprang, Patroclus, on Cebriones. Then Hector too leapt down out of his chariot, and the 2 men fought over the body like 2 mountain lions over the carcass of a buck, both famished, both in pride of combat. So these 2 fought now for Cebriones, 2 champions, Patroclus, son of Menoetius, and Hector, hurling their bronze to tear each other's flesh. Hector caught hold of the dead man's head and held, while his antagonist clung to a single foot, as Trojans and Danaans pressed the fight. As south wind and the southeast wind, contending in mountain groves, make all the forest thrash, beech trees and ash trees and the slender cornel swaying their pointed boughs toward one another in roaring wind, and snapping branches crack, so Trojans and Achaeans made a din as lunging they destroyed each other. Neither considered ruinous flight. Many sharp spears and arrows, trued by feathers from the strings, were fixed in flesh around Cebriones, and boulders crashed on shields as they fought on around him. And a dust cloud wrought by a whirlwind hid the greatness of him slain, minding no more the mastery of horses. Until the sun stood at high noon in heaven, spears bit on both sides, and the soldiers fell. But when the sun passed toward unyoking time, the Achaeans outfought destiny to prevail. Now they dragged off gallant Cebriones out of range, away from the shouting Trojans, to strip his shoulders of his gear. And fierce Patroclus hurled himself upon the Trojans in onslaughts fast as Ares, 3 times, wild yells in his throat. Each time he killed 9 men. But on the 4th demonic foray, then the end of life loomed up for you, Patroclus. Into the combat dangerous Phoebus came against him, but Patroclus could not see the god, enwrapped in cloud as he came near. He stood behind and struck with open hand the man's back and broad shoulders, and the eyes of the fighting man were dizzied by the blow. Then Phoebus sent the captain's helmet rolling under the horse's hooves, making the ridge ring out, and dirtying all the horsehair plume with blood and dust. Never in time before had this plumed helmet been befouled with dust, the helmet that had kept a hero's brow unmarred, shielding Achilles' head. Now Zeus bestowed it upon Hector. Let him wear it, though his destruction waited. For Patroclus felt his great spear shaft shattered in his hands, long, tough, well shod, and seasoned though it was. His shield and strap fell to the ground. The Lord Apollo, son of Zeus, broke off his cuirass. Shock ran through him, and his good legs failed, so that he stood agape. Then from behind, at close quarters, between the shoulder blades, a Dardan fighter speared him. Panthous's son, Euphorbus, the best Trojan of his age at handling spears, in horsemanship and running, he had brought 20 chariot fighters down since entering combat in his chariot, already skilled in the craft of war. This man was first to wound you with a spear, Patroclus, but did not bring you down. Instead, he ran back into the melee, pulling from the flesh his ashen spear, and would not face his enemy, even disarmed in battle. Then Patroclus, disabled by the god's blow and the spear wound, moved back to save himself amid his men. But Hector, seeing that his brave adversary tried to retire, hurt by the spear wound, charged straight at him through the ranks and lunged for him low in the flank, driving the spearhead through. He crashed, and all Achaean troops turned pale. Think how a lion in his pride brings down a tireless boar. Magnificently they fight on a mountain crest for a small gushing spring, both in desire to drink. And by sheer power the lion conquers the great panting boar. That was the way the son of Priam, Hector, closed with Patroclus, son of Menoetius, killer of many, and took his life away. Then, glorying above him, he addressed him. "Easy to guess, Patroclus, how you swore to ravage Troy, to take the sweet daylight of liberty from our women, and to drag them off in ships to your own land. You fool! Between you and those women there is Hector's war team, thundering out to fight. My spear has pride of place among the Trojan warriors, keeping their evil hour at bay. The kites will feed on you here on this field. Poor devil, what has that great prince Achilles done for you? He must have told you often, as you were leaving and he stayed behind. Never come back to me, to the deep-sea ships, Patroclus, till you cut to rags the bloody tunic on the chest of Hector. That must have been the way he talked, and won your mind to mindlessness." In a low, faint voice, Patroclus, master of horse, you answered him. "This is your hour to glory over me, Hector. The Lord Zeus and Apollo gave you the upper hand and put me down with ease. They stripped me of my arms, no one else did. Say 20 men like you had come against me, all would have died before my spear. No, Leto's son and fatal destiny have killed me. If we speak of men, Euphorbus, you were in 3rd place, only in at the death. I'll tell you one thing more, take it to heart. No long life is ahead for you. This day your death stands near, and your immutable end at Prince Achilles' hands." His own death came on him as he spoke, and soul from body, bemoaning severance from youth and manhood, slipped to be wafted to the underworld. Even in death, Prince Hector still addressed him. "Why prophesy my sudden death, Patroclus? Who knows? Achilles, son of bright-haired Thetis, might be hit first. He might be killed by me." At this, he pulled his spearhead from the wound, setting his heel upon him. Then he pushed him over on his back, clear of the spear, and lifting it at once, sought Myrmidon, companion of the great runner Achilles, longing to strike him. But the immortal horses, gift of the gods to Peleus, bore him away.